Hi there. Welcome to another edition of TokStocks. I'm your host, Keir Reynolds, and today we're lucky enough to have Kjirstin Breure, President and CEO for HydroGraph, trades on the CSE with the ticker HG. How you doing today, Kjirstin?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. It's not every day that I have a guest on who's CEO of a billion-dollar market cap company that trades primarily on the CSE. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Kind of before we sort of dive into it, from what I've read, HydroGraph is solving commercialization problems related to graphene. Critics have said that it might be hype wrapped up in science. So today I'm hoping that we can separate a bit of fact and fiction, and hopefully you can help us with that. Maybe for our first kind of question, the elevator pitch. What's HydroGraph? What's it all about?
So HydroGraph is a graphene producer. Graphene is just one atomic layer of carbon atoms, and it is to date the strongest and most conductive material discovered. Most companies are using graphite as a feedstock because you can imagine graphite is billions and billions of layers of graphene, and they're mechanically or chemically exfoliating it. HydroGraph is completely synthetic, so we actually have a detonation synthesis. I know that sounds very serious, where we effectively blow up hydrocarbon gases. So we explode acetylene and oxygen very safely in a steel chamber with electrodes. And then in that one instant, we are able to produce what we believe is the highest performing material in the industry.
Wow, very cool. Yes, that is quite a mouthful to say, and that's some fancy words there. Most of this interview is probably going to be way over my head, but thank you for getting into the detail, and please go into it. So I guess the first dumb question or second dumb question, what is graphene and where is it used?
Yeah, that's always a good question. It is a true nanomaterial, and I know this is an odd concept, but it's really truly two-dimensional, and that means you have to put something two-dimensional onto a 3D matrix. So it is a true additive. You're often going to use about 1% graphene. And when you look at graphene, it's really just a black, fluffy powder. Ours looks a lot like a carbon black. The difference is it's completely crystalline, which is important, and it's completely sp2 bonded. sp2 bonding is really what makes the graphene have that honeycomb-like lattice. For example, if it's sp3, it might be acetylene black, or for example, a diamond structure is sp3. It does not have nanomaterial properties. So again, we find that these nanomaterials, graphene being a great example, behave differently once you get to the quantum scale. So putting a very, very small amount can fundamentally alter material properties. And you can use graphene. If you imagine our natural world, it's mostly comprised of carbon. And so that means that graphene is very versatile. They're now putting it in biosensors. It can be used internally in drug delivery systems. You can make it for water membranes, concrete, carbon fiber, batteries, you name it. Almost any material that you can think of can be positively improved, usually by making things lighter, faster, stronger with graphene.
So what's an end product look like? Does it come in like a bag of sand, or what is this like end sort of use sort of product after you get done in your chamber? What comes out?
Right. That's a good question. It's really, it's very gel-like. Our graphene specifically is very gel-like. So it's very fluffy. It's about 97% air. If you push it down really hard, it actually pops back up a little bit. So it has this kind of springy effect. And that's really the basis of our actuator patent that we just issued. So it's really a very, very fluffy powder. If you let it loose, it will just start to float around the room. It's very, very light. So with this, we're normally shipping a powder. We could also ship dispersions, or when we're working with plastics companies, we would ship a master batch.
So 97% air. Wow, very cool. And what you kind of mentioned these chambers, this reactor type situation. I guess it's called a Hyperion sort of reactor. Mm-hmm. What is that? Is that unique to you guys? Is it off the shelf tech? Maybe explain again kind of what that does?
Right. So legally, we're the only company that can be exploding hydrocarbon gases to produce graphene. That is our core technology. But I would say that most of the components in our reactor, for one, they're all US made, but they are mostly off the shelf components. So we have a number of trade secrets where we have improved various components or produced components in-house. But these reactors can be built quickly. They're quite affordable for us to be building, and they have a very long expected life, because really all that's happening is we're pumping in these gases into very, very thick carbon steel chambers that can withstand a lot. We force that exothermic reaction, and then immediately we have this gel-like graphene produced inside. We pull it out, and then the detonation happens over and over and over again. And I would mention that Dr. Sorensen has been working on this technology for more than a decade. So he is well versed in these detonation synthesis processes, and he is very well accustomed really to how to do that. And of course, all of that learning has really transferred to our production team.
Well, you got the internal combustion engine that has many explosions that are happening for hundreds of thousands of miles. So I guess it wouldn't be unheard of to think that it could be done on a different scale, producing a different sort of product. You use some, when I read through your website and your deck and did a lot of prep work for the interview, you call this graphene fractal and turbostratic, 100% sp2 bonding, like you were nice enough to sort of give us a bit of an overview of. Why is your graphene better than other people's graphene?
Loaded question. There's a lot I could say. I know there's a lot of fancy words out there. So let's first define the words that we're talking about. So fractal, I know it sounds like a lot, but it's very simple. It's just a repeating pattern. So for example, if we see a snowflake, that's a fractal pattern. So our graphene forms what we call a fractal aggregate. That's why we call it FGA1. And really all that means is it's kind of exploding out in these branching formulations. And so if you imagine a tightly stacked deck of cards, that is what a lot of graphene is like, where the carbon is really, really impacted. And again, carbon wants to stick together. So that's a normal state. Ours is turbostratic. So if you imagine these branching patterns, but then if you zoom in, all of these little particles are kind of loosely coupled where there's this space between them. That's really what turbostratic is. There's this space between the layers. And that's really important, because when you're processing graphene, what you want is you want the graphene particles to separate and then all have their own space in a new material, so they can start bonding and branching and then creating to the overall integrity of the new material that you're creating. Does that make sense?
Yes, a little bit. You were able to, I managed to follow what you were saying, and excellent explanation of of fractal. I'll have a new way to explain it to my kids with the snowflake. It's fractal. Anyways, before we sort of, jump ahead, maybe you could kind of explain HydroGraph, your company, here in one sentence. It would make both an investor and a materials engineer sort of sit up and pay attention.
Ooh, in one sentence, that's hard. I'm a woman of many words. I would say, I really believe that we create the strongest material for this next era of nanotechnology with really the greatest economic potential. I really think this company is going to revolutionize future technologies.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I think that sort of about did it. We kept to some nice, tight, edited language there. So I think you did it in one sentence. Maybe a little bit more on you. I'm already very impressed that I've asked you a few questions and you've been able to answer them very intelligently. What's your background? How did you get to where you are today? What did you do before HydroGraph?
Sure. So I have a master's in material science and engineering. Previous to HydroGraph, I was involved in different startups. Knowing the startup space, most of them were not successful. And I feel very lucky that I came across HydroGraph. I was previously working in a company that was looking at graphene as a thermal, they were looking at thermal properties of graphene for semiconductor manufacturing. And I really had an introduction to the founder of HydroGraph, and I was immediately hooked. And I thought, this company really has everything that it takes. It has the scalability, it has the purity, and knowing the potential reach that graphene has, I was just immediately hooked. I knew I had to be a part of the company.
Excellent. Maybe valuation, like I mentioned at the beginning of the interview today, you're over a Canadian $1 billion market cap. trading on the CSE. It's been a while since we've seen many companies sort of cross that trade on a fairly small Canadian exchange. So congratulations on that. How should investors kind of look at how they value HydroGraph? Should they? It would sound like you've got a fairly diverse or quite a large sort of patent or IP sort of portfolio. Should they look at it as what you could do from a manufacturing sort of basis in terms of selling off your graphene into various different sectors? How do you think investors should kind of look today at the future potential and valuation of the company?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for one, we're very lucky to be here. I think luck does have some certain element. We had some very aggressive shareholders pick up the story earlier in the summer, Kevin Bambro being one, very grateful for that support. And that's really served as kind of a catalyst. And I think at this point, even though we do have a relatively large valuation for a pre-revenue company, I do think very firmly this is really only the beginning. And if we look at kind of the fundamentals of the company, we have a very, very strong margin where, to say 70% would be conservative. We have a very strong moat around our IP, and we have an unlimited market where we have the highest performance, which is provable and verified by third parties. And if we look at and I know I've said this in other interviews, but we are receiving more and more interest from the federal government. And if you think of it, even if you subtract HydroGraph, if you think of what they're looking for, we have all US patents. Will be soon a fully US company because operationally we've always been focused on the US. And we do have more and more the ability to onshore critical mineral development. And I know graphene isn't an exact mineral per se. It's not like graphite, but it can reduce our reliance on critical minerals, and it can really positively improve not only the materials that we're using, but the metals and minerals that really go into all of our technologies. And so I do believe more and more, not just HydroGraph, but all graphene companies will be viewed as kind of a national security concern. And I believe that is why the industry as a whole is getting more attention now.
Lots to unpack there. I look forward to it. Thank you for that. Let's go over cap table a little bit. You've had you guys just recently announced the financing. I think it was around a $20 million life offering, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sure that's going to be somewhat oversubscribed. You might not be able to comment on that, but your guys' shares today are trading at a pretty good premium from the life offering. Mm-hmm. But prior to closing that financing, what's the current sort of issued and outstanding and sort of fully diluted share count for the company?
Fully diluted prior to the financing is about 354 million shares. We have been seeing a lot of warrants come in. So we had actually a very strong balance sheet even in advance of the financing. And when we're looking at the financing, I mean, we were extremely pleased to see our momentum in the market. And it was a great opportunity. There was so much interest for financing, and all things considered, it's about 3% dilution. So the amount that we will achieve with that funding is really, I think, strongly worth it for all shareholders.
And how many, what's the sort of issue outstanding? So if we take away sort of options and warrants and things like that, what's the sort of issued outstanding amount today prior to financing?
Prior to the financing, about 324 million.
And when I was looking at it some months ago, when there was a bit of attention and awareness put on it by Kevin, mm-hmm. I did notice there was quite a few sort of warrants that were sort of outstanding. And you've been starting to see, I guess you can't officially sort of comment and give numbers, but you've started to see some of those warrants get exercised. They'd be well in the money now.
Yes. Can't give formal numbers, but we have seen a majority of the warrants become exercised, which is great to see.
How much of the company is still owned by insiders and management?
Less than 5%.
Are there any sort of RSUs or DSUs or any other incentive-based compensation outside of stock options?
Yes, we have recently moved to have RSUs in addition to options.
And are those tied to any sort of like milestones or achievements or time?
RSUs, no. A significant portion of previous options have been tied to performance metrics.
Does the company currently carry any debt, loans, lines of credit, any related party transactions?
No.
I did notice that you guys put out a nice sort of good update, and buried in the bottom was a little line about a resolution of a commercial dispute.
Mm-hmm.
The settlement and release included 750,000 common shares of the company that are expected to be issued on or about October 28th. And it's anticipated the shares will not be subject to any hold period. Are you able to comment? I would imagine you can't comment too much more beyond what the news release indicated, but there wasn't a whole lot of transparency on that. Is there anything you can say about it?
I am constantly wishing I could be more transparent on this. I can't say too much. I will say this is something that happened that we had to handle before my time. So this was something, from previous management that we now had to handle now. But I will say that the party that's referencing is a very strong supporter of HydroGraph, and I do believe they will be a long-term holder. So I don't think that this is concern for shareholders. And as always, we are always negotiating the best thing for the company.
Could you just go over the structure of the current financing? Are you guys, what's the price of the offering? And are there any warrants or any sweeteners sort of attached to it?
Yes, this is bittersweet for me because I really don't love warrants, and I've said that publicly many times. It's really just where the market is in Canada, and all things considered, I know I already mentioned it, but at only 3% dilution with how quickly we can now accelerate our scale up, I did judge that it was worth it. So it's priced at 290 Canadian, of course, and it does come with a half warrant priced at 350 with an acceleration at 2x.
There's also been a little bit of chatter about a possible uplisting to a senior U.S. exchange, such as the NASDAQ. What can you comment about this? Is that just wild speculation? Is it something the company is officially sort of put out there? It seems like with being a U.S.-focused sort of operation company, U.S. sort of patent portfolio, and such a critical strategic sort of opportunity that maybe this story would resonate with US-based investors where there's many more and much more pools of capital. Anything you could comment on?
Yes. And I think to again kind of just speak to, the macro system, I guess there's multiple parts. For one, we're absolutely looking at a NASDAQ uplist. We are also looking to redomicile. And if we think of the opportunity, for example, with the DoD, it is very important to be a US-based company. For us, we've always been operationally US-based. We have very little activity in Canada. We never really have had much activity. Not only will that really unlock access to grant funding, but again, the DoD strongly prioritizes US-based companies. So I think the combination of moving more fully to the US, and we will move forward with that at a time that makes sense for the company, and we will disclose more information really as we formalize a plan. But NASDAQ is just greater access to liquidity, access to index funds. It's going to, I think, really propel the company forward.
Maybe we could just kind of go into the history of HydroGraph and its technology. You guys also are involved in a few labs, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that the technology or the company kind of started in Manhattan, Kansas, and is largely tied to Dr. Chris Sorensen, who's at K-State. What still happens there today? Maybe you could explain a little bit about the history of the company and its technology.
Sure. So everything we have, I'm lucky to be a part of this company. Everything we have is because of the brilliant Dr. Sorensen. So this is based off of work that he's been really completing for, more than a decade, likely more than 15 years. So he has been a physicist at Kansas State University, now professor emeritus, and he is our vice president R&D. So we have a pilot lab, or a pilot facility, I should say, in Manhattan, Kansas, the other Manhattan. And that is really because the IP, of course, comes from there. Dr. Sorensen lives in Manhattan, as does Stephen Corkill, our VP operations, who's designed and built all of our reactors. But we are now moving that facility to Texas, where we will have a headquarters in Austin and a large-scale production facility in the Houston region. We will just close the exact location in due time. And I would say that apart from production, we have a number of experiments that are ongoing. Dr. Sorensen is extremely prolific, and he will be a very strong component of the Texas migration as well.
Why Texas? Why the move there?
Lots of reasons. I think that for one, there are abundant hydrocarbons in Texas. I think that's the most obvious. There's also a huge pool of engineering talent, very high quality of life, I find, in Austin, Texas. But overall, it's just very business friendly. It is so simple to do business in Texas. I'm, of course, Canadian. I'm kind of regretful that so many Canadians are saddened that we're leaving Canada, but it's just made a lot of sense. It's close to the team operationally. Again, we've always been US based, and Texas has everything we need. It's all driving distance, and it's all been very easy and accessible.
Why the split in between the locations? You've talked about Austin for a headquarter and then Houston for warehouse production facility. Why would you sort of split those two?
To be very honest with you, none of us really want to live in Houston.
Okay.
Apart from that, Austin's a little bit more diverse. Houston's very petrochemical. We're not truly oil and gas. We are oil and gas adjacent with our feedstocks, but we really want that diverse. We want to hire, material scientists, physicists, everything. And Austin really does have a lot more diversity in companies. It's a little bit more high tech focused, which I think suits us very well. Great quality of life. The headquarters, I think, is going to be a great place to build out the corporate team. And it's accessible, of course, for customers to come and view our technology, for potential investors to view our technology. And I think it's going to make more sense when we disclose more on the large scale production facility. It's in an interesting location, so we'll share more when we can.
Have you begun leasing this Houston facility? There's been online chatter with people looking to do gotcha moments, traveling down to Texas and trying to look up whether there's an office or a facility located at an address. Maybe you could just comment on like what's sort of currently active, what you've got under active lease, and then when things might materialize a bit further in terms of being able to provide an update.
Right. So it is admittedly taking longer than we expected. This has been, I would say, we started the process likely in January. I just want to urge that even though I am trying to move it forward as quickly as possible, it is a really big undertaking for a relatively small company to have access to an acetylene pipeline with a very, very, very large company. There's a lot of checks and balances that come along with it. You can imagine the time that goes between both of our legal teams. And that's really what we're caught in right now. There's certainly no issue. Everything is going well. They've been wonderful to work with, but it has been a slower process as there's just so many pieces. There's the regulatory aspect, there's the ground lease, there's the design of the building. I think when I'm able to disclose more, I will certainly schedule a webcast and kind of explain what the timeline has meant for us, and that this is not a negative thing. And then I can be a little bit more transparent, because right now, until we sign, I can't really speak to it.
Is the headquarter in Austin, Texas? Is that operational?
No, that's under construction right now. So that's 2101 St. Elmo, Suite 150. We've announced the location there. That will be open likely the middle of February, maybe the end of February. We're just doing some leasehold improvements. So we're, of course, changing the interior to our liking. We're going to have a large control room type setup in the middle where we can remotely monitor any future facilities. That would include, of course, the Houston location. But really, as we grow, I'm sure we will have additional facilities that we'll be able to remotely access from Austin.
You kind of touched on it, but there, like I indicated, there was a bit of speculation with people on Twitter rolling up to locations and maybe suggesting that something wasn't where it should be. Could you just directly address that speculation? I think you have. Austin is not operational yet. There's leasehold improvements. You have disclosed the address. The Houston facility you haven't disclosed, and there's a strategic reason why you haven't, with a potential partner, or I guess access to the hydrocarbons. So is there anything more that you need to sort of go into or want to explain about these things so that people maybe can stop with the amateur gumshoe?
I don't think people will ever stop with that. For one, I no longer have time to check Twitter or the forums, so I honestly have no idea what people are saying there. I feel we've been pretty transparent. We've really disclosed as much as we're legally able to on Austin. We plan on having a large opening party in Austin. We plan to show off our technology. We'll invite, the media there. We hope to invite some politicians. I'm hoping some military contacts. So we will be as transparent as possible, and all of that is really being planned now. For Houston, of course, until I sign legally, I really can't say anything. Just with, I'm sure you can imagine. So I'm looking forward to when I can say more. My hands are tied, but when I can, as mentioned, I will explain the process. And I really do think that apart from, like I did admit, it is taking a little bit longer than I did expect, but this is still tied very closely to our commercial scale up. And we believe that this timing is actually best for HydroGraph because we haven't really wanted to be in a situation where we're forced to spend that amount of capital before it's really truly needed. And now that things are going at this pace, this is much healthier for us as well. So this is certainly not something that anyone should be concerned about.
Okay, great. Moving on. Let's talk a little bit more about your tech again. Shorts, there's been some short reports, and I guess there's been some concern about what your all-in cost per kilogram would look like eventually as compared to other forms of graphene. Is there anything that you can comment on related to that, what your targeted or estimated all-in cost per kilogram?
I mean, for one, we have lots and lots of data of using our machine. So even now, we are at a very healthy margin. We're very confident. I mean, the machine is running at 94+% uptime. We have very few failure rates. It runs, very well, very consistently. We haven't had an issue with any of that. We have released quite a lot of information. Of course, there's a lot of pieces, none which I'm willing to disclose publicly, that go into those numbers. But we are very confident there. And I think that we have a much healthier margin than our competition. And I think the one thing I couldn't really get my head around with the short report is the lack of understanding that for this thought that we won't be able to manage the detonations at scale. I mean, we've been doing this for almost a decade. We do this really, really well. The whole company is based on us being able to manage a detonation. And when you think about it, there's nothing to explode. I don't know what they're thinking of, but it's an empty steel chamber that is very, very thick carbon steel. There's nothing to blow up inside of it. So I don't know what people think is going to go wrong, but that's just a fundamental misunderstanding of our technology. So I found that one kind of interesting, but have I answered your question?
Yes, I think so. How do these reactor units kind of work? You guys pull these things together with off-the-shelf sort of parts, and what's the sort of cost, estimated cost? Have you gone into any of that in terms of how much it will cost per reactor? Do they come in different sizes or capacities? And what's your current sort of tonnage capacity?
Sure. So we've produced probably more than 1.5 tons to date. Now we're running it very consistently. So we expect to be able to produce with our 10-ton unit, if we really maximize it, about 1 ton every month. And we are doing so now. So we're running it full time now that we have, better access to capital and a bigger team. We are replicating the 10-ton unit. So the 10-ton unit, the CapEx on that is $350,000 US. Our cost to produce 1 ton of graphene is about $50,000, and our starting selling price per ton is $250,000. Because this unit has really been de-risked, we've been using it for years, we have made the decision to increase our capacity with what is known while we work on we could say 20-ton unit. We are expecting it to actually get to 25 tons. So we're going to give ourselves a range. And then once we have that data from running it consistently, we can, formally disclose what the actual capacity is. But we're expecting between 20 and 25 metric tons from the larger unit. and the CapEx should be about $500,000. And so we're really in the final design stages. We will build that. We'll make sure that we're running it with enough months that by the time that we choose to replicate it, it's de-risked and debugged.
Let's talk about the regulatory gate. How many regulatory bodies have to be involved or weigh in on this for you to be able to commercialize this technology and sell products commercially?
Well, that's it's depending on what we're targeting. So at high level, we need EPA approval. So the EPA is, of course, delayed because the government is closed. We had an update on our file. I would love to share more. I don't think that there's any issue here, but just with selective disclosure, I'll have to wait and provide a formal update to the EPA. And, we need to get approval from the Texas Air Quality Board. And then really beyond that, it's depending on the industry that we're targeting. So if we're going for aerospace, we'd need AS 9100. We plan to really go for more defense opportunities. There are a number of new regulations that we'll need to abide by, like NADCAP, CMMC, and quite a bit more. And we are already hard at work on those.
Excellent. And are you behind on some of these approvals? I guess the EPA is one that a lot of investors have been hanging on. Is that somewhat sort of behind from maybe what was stated previously a few years ago, or are you behind in terms of what investors would expect?
Yes. I think as everyone is aware, there were some significant changes at the federal level. So NIOSH, one of the groups that we've been working with the EPA, was effectively gutted. We were told that our file would take 90 days to review. That was a hard limit that they imposed. That came and went. No one was answering our calls. It was very frustrating, and that we're not the only ones that faced that. The whole industry faced that. So if you didn't already have it, everything was delayed. While it was certainly frustrating on our part, things have picked back up. So we do now have a team that we're working with. Again, we believe it will be in hand really as soon as the government's open. We're just patiently waiting for that moment.
In terms of approvals, any that you're going with, will they have any limitations on the type of volumetric limits that you could sort of produce?
We will. So we will have a limit that I can't disclose because that would be selective, but I will provide more information as soon as I'm able to.
Okay. So you kind of went through a little bit. I was just wanting to go through unit economics and scale a little bit. Again, you might not be able to comment on it. There's various information out there related to, I guess, competitors that investors might consider competitors that maybe you don't think are competitors.
Sure.
But what sort of cost per kilo do you think this is going to come in at in terms of your cost to produce a kilo of commercialized sellable graphene related product?
Sure. So I think I touched on that. It's about $50,000 a ton, meaning it would be about $50 a kilo, and selling price of $250 a kilo. And I really want to make a point. We are at the higher end of the market. We are selling really, I would say for the synthetic, we're probably at par with a lot of the other synthetic producers. There are some very low cost producers that I know are much, much lower, closer to $20 or $50 a kilo. But I also would make a strong point to say that our graphene is so much more powerful than everything else on the market. We're often using 10 to 100 times less. So when you look at the cost in the application, we are often the cheapest. Not always, but often. If you're really going for performance and you're not going to decrease the amount of material you're using for that cost savings, if you're really going for maximum performance, we might be slightly more expensive. But we find in those situations, the customer is more than willing to pay for a radically different end material.
All right. And just one more time. I just want to make sure we didn't misspeak. Was it $500 a kilo or $50 a kilo? That would be your cost.
Our cost is $50 a kilo, and our selling price bottom price is $250. But if we have a post process, it could go all the way up to $800.
Okay. Sounds good. What's the size of market? And again, there's various different markets, but what would be kind of the most immediate markets that you could eventually take this product into when you commercialize? Would it be, I've read some Kevin Bambro stuff, and I enjoy reading his stuff, and just how committed he is to things. I've sort of been following him for years, but he's mentioned kind of the cement market and things like that as just one of them. What would be kind of the key sort of like initial markets that you guys believe would be sort of the easiest to kind of tap into, and how large are those markets?
Mm-hmm. Good question. So, in total, I would say you almost can't calculate the TAM with this because graphene can be used in anything. We are very focused on composites and coatings. So the coatings market is going to be more than 200 billion. The composites market is going to be more than 90. And I know there's all different data points on that. So I guess it depends on your source. But regardless, they're very large markets. And importantly, it's near-term revenue opportunities. And that's not really including, it all kind of depends on how much these customers are going to commercialize their product lines. If they're going to commercialize a huge amount of their product lines, this could really balloon out very quickly.
Do you have any sort of like pilot programs or companies that you're in talks with about testing your product or are testing it? What can you comment on about, I guess, maybe your pipeline?
Of course. So I've stated publicly, the military has been testing us for more than a year. Various customers, we have more than 65. We were just at the K Fair, so now it's much, much higher than that. I think our total customer list is higher than 75 now. Regardless, we have customers in all different stages. We have a lot of them that we've just shipped our first samples, so they've just started engaging with us. Of course, because I was moved to CEO in March of 24, a lot of the outreach we're doing is still with new customers, but some of the customers are still at the later stage now. So there are a number that are in that industrial scale up trials with us. And so we are expecting some of those to start converting into long-term supply agreements as soon as next year.
So maybe next year you might be able to comment publicly on a few other names.
That's kind of an uncertainty. I know there's a few we will be able to name. A lot of the customers don't want to be named. It's a competitive advantage for them to keep it a bit of a secret right now, especially because there's so much poor quality graphene in the market. If we're not granting exclusivity, the average customer doesn't want it to be known, who is supplying them.
So you say you've kind of got 75 various different entities that are somewhere in a test pilot, early stage kind of discussion, your sort of pipeline of potential commercial partners. Not all of them will, but that's sort of your, pipeline of potential. Have you guys started to do any kind of math on if a percentage of those converted into sort of annual supply agreements, what sort of tonnage that would be? Again, I've just asked, have you started to do it? I'm not asking for the numbers, but what can you comment on?
Yes, we have. And I look forward to disclosing more on that soon.
So if I'm going to be devil's advocate here, some critics said that you guys seem to spend a bit more on promotion than your R&D. How can you comment to that? What do you want to comment at all about maybe what some of these people think? And I believe if you look at your financials, there's been a pretty hefty amount sort of spent towards kind of marketing and sort of investor relation type activity. Am I wrong about that?
Well, for one, the numbers in the short report are not accurate at all. So people should I would encourage investors to read our actual financials because it's hugely different. But again, promotion for us includes trade shows. It includes travel to and from the trade shows, us exhibiting, us talking to customers. We do product promotion. All of these things are sales. Very little of that is investor relations. And also, I would hope that our shareholders are also supportive of me going out to conferences and talking about the company because it has been my overwhelming schedule for the past year that has reached $1 billion valuation, which is a strong contribution to the economic profit that our shareholders have felt.
And for full disclosure, you are not paying for this interview in any whatsoever way at all possible. I am a shareholder of the company, but I don't have any contractual obligation to do anything. I'm not being paid or compensated in any way. So there you go. You get a freebie on the house. So they can't be bad about this one. You talked about early on in the interview, maybe some independent labs kind of publishing results and things like that. Are you able to kind of, again, you mentioned a few names. They're over my head, lots to sort of unpack. Are there a few that you can sort of talk about that can provide some third party validation to some of the things that you as a company that you say?
Sure. So, I mean, apart from the Geek, which I would say is a strong third party validation, we have been tested and characterized by NPL, which is the National Physical Laboratory in the UK, really the leading source for graphene related characterization. And there are a number of other labs. We've worked with NEI, they have their own formulations with us. Hawkeye Biomedical has a real product that's being sold in labs all over China, all over Europe, and now soon in the US. We just announced their new distribution partner. I mean, our graphene is very much real, that all of these third parties are not only releasing data, but have actual products that are either being sold or are in the pipeline.
Geek, can you? I know some of the viewers will absolutely know about that, and I have read that it's rather important. There's been quite a bit of comments on it. Could you just break that down a little bit more about who they are and how important it is to the company?
Sure. So I often say this has really been our largest commercial catalyst. The GEEK stands for the Graphene Engineering Innovation Center, and that's in Manchester, where graphene was discovered in 2004. So it's kind of tied to the University of Manchester, and it was really created as an innovation hub to start to commercialize graphene and graphene related materials. So there is not only other graphene companies that are stationed there, but there are other graphene users. And so we joined in the beginning of 2024, and we have been awarded, I would say, most of the projects that have come through their doors. I caution in that because we don't get access to all the information. There are certainly confidentiality agreements that they have with customers. So sometimes when customers come in, they have a confidential project and they may or may not be using our graphene, which is kind of different as well. I would also point out that when we joined, I gave them about 20 kilos of graphene, which is quite a lot of graphene for research purposes. And other companies have shied away from that because if you're not sure that you're going to perform, you don't want that in the hands of other people that are going to talk about that, disclose it. You don't want a negative result you don't have control over. Because we have performed so consistently and we have such a high performance material, we've been it's a great structure for us. It's a structure that suits us very well. And what we like most of all is when we're benchmarked against other graphenes, because to my knowledge, we have always outperformed.
And when you say outperform, what does that sort of mean? Does that mean, is that on various different performance measures, like strength, flexibility? Like, I don't know, what when you say it's outperformed, what are some of the benchmarks that you've outperformed?
So when we're looking at compressive strength, we have a higher value. When we're looking at flexural strength, when we're looking at all these different tests that the Geek does, we have better mechanical performance and we often have better conductivity.
All right. So why don't we move along to leadership and governance and maybe address some online rumors? So I said that you're CEO and president and CEO. I believe that also includes chair, if I'm not mistaken. So that's three pretty good sized hats to wear. What do you say about maybe when some question whether there's independent oversight? Can you discuss maybe the rest of the board?
Sure. So, I mean, we have a very experienced board. We have had some pretty significant changes to the board, which were really undertaken to prepare for NASDAQ. I guess if I can be a little bit provocative, I have not been very pleased with the regulations in the CSE. I'm really, really looking forward to the improved regulations that we will need to abide by for NASDAQ. I think that unfortunately, Canada is very light they're very strict with what you can say in press releases via Zero, but very loose on governance and everything else. So you can do a lot on the CSE, and I believe also the TSX. I find that not only damaging for companies, because it is good to have transparency and it's good to have governance, but I think it's also dangerous for shareholders and investors. So I am fully supportive of all of the checks and balances that we're going to need to abide by for NASDAQ. We have been discussing at the board level if I'll remain chair. I don't know how big of a deal it is as long as we have an independent chair that is overseeing everything. And again, NASDAQ is just not, it's not an environment that you get away with not having governance. So we will do whatever is best for the company. If that means that I step away from chair, I'm more than happy to do that.
You indicated that you moved into your role as CEO in 2024. What sort of led up to that sort of process? When did you first start with the company, and what were you sort of doing in order to prepare for the big seat?
So I started as the first employee. I was COO. I was kind of the only one apart from the founder, Harold Davidson. I've now been given co-founder status, which is very nice to see from the board. I moved to president right around the time that we listed publicly on the CSE in December of 21. And then, as you're aware, moved to CEO in March of 24. But really, since inception, I mean, this was me pushing for a certain strategy, creating the first facility, building the first team, directing our research budget, creating the first pitch decks, communicating publicly. I have really from day one taken on everything that I could. And it's really been, I guess, kind of my baby. So I care very deeply about this company. And, I've not only invested myself, but my friends and family have all invested in this company. I'm really, really deeply committed to seeing this as a success. And I would also say that, I'm very, very close to Dr. Sorensen and Stephen Corkill, and we're a very close team. And I want more than anything for Dr. Sorensen to see this as a success, not only, financially, which is great for everyone, but I think he is such a brilliant scientist, and this is such an amazing discovery that he really deserves the recognition, and he deserves this to be at full commercial state.
How did you and Chris meet?
Well, because I joined the parent co in Vancouver. So I was working with Harold Davidson, who was then the CEO. And I guess we planned a trip to Manhattan. I got to meet the team. At that point, this was really an experiment in a back room in the debt lab at Kansas State University. Certainly was not commercial. And we've really seen it grow to that point. So back then, Chris was still a professor at Kansas State University. We, of course, then brought him on board as VP R&D, and we've been working together since then.
Thank you for going through that. Now, I have to ask kind of an uncomfortable question, but I think people would be annoyed if I didn't ask you. There's been some online chatter. There's been a few reports that have questioned your background. There's been some pretty salacious rumors suggesting about prior modeling or influencer work, and even a reference that you might be the Elizabeth Holmes, but of an OnlyFans tier. Pretty awful things to sort of read and see. I looked into this and I couldn't find any actual sort of evidence, despite quite a bit of research. But, would you like a chance to sort of address those accusations directly?
I believe if I had an OnlyFans, that would have been uncovered by now. So I think it goes without saying that is flatly untrue. I think it speaks to the profit that these short sellers are. They say in the report that they're, the intent is to profit. They profit by making everything look really bad. What I believe happened is with a private Instagram account, there was a bikini photo that was leaked, and that was made to seem that I am some sort of influencer. Of course, I'm a young woman. I have taken photos, posted them. I don't think that really has anything to do with HydroGraph. There's certainly never been an OnlyFans account. I think that it's just what is the motive? I find it disappointing. I think the way that women are treated, I find it a very, I'm going to try to use a kind word. It's very uninteresting to call me Elizabeth Holmes. I'm blonde. I don't know where else the relations are. We have really proven this technology. It is, a real thing we're making that other people have tested. If anyone even does the bare minimum of research, you can see that there's really no further relation. So I find it a little bit ridiculous, a little bit disappointing, as many rumors as there have been. I've been very lucky to have a lot of messages of support. So I'm sure this is not going to go away. I think it's every CEO's life. And I think, the amount of messages I had from other CEOs kind of saying, welcome to the club can be worse. It's just the new reality. I think when you get to this level, there's always going to be a target on your back. So I think that's really all it is.
Do you think that women in leadership roles face unfair or sexist accusations?
Well, of course, I think, I'm a human being. I'm allowed to post a bikini photo privately. And that does not mean that there is any adult content. So I find that upsetting, but it is what it is. And I think that, again, the mode is profit. And I think that that's not going to go away. And I think that men are subjected certainly to different things, but I think in that sense, in the very sexist sense, women certainly have it differently.
Well, thank you for answering that. A bit of an uncomfortable series of questions to ask, but thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm sure that must be very hard on the mental health, the mental state to read and receive accusations like that. So definitely sorry to hear and have read and seen some of those things. Why don't we jump into something a little different here? Has the company, sorry, I'll just, I'm sorry, I skipped over. Oh, here we go. Why don't we talk about Kjirstin Breure? Kjirstin Breure has been one of HydroGraph's loudest supporters on social media. Has he ever been formally compensated, or does he have any sort of compensated relationship with the company?
No.
He's sort of mentioned some pretty lofty share price projections. He's even mentioned some projections, I think if it wasn't earlier today, it was yesterday. How do those sort of reflect your internal models? And is that something that you want to comment on, or is that just left for him? These are his own calculations.
These are his own calculations. These are not the perspective of the company. I, again, will say that I'm not following Twitter anymore. I have way too much work to do than to track what people are saying online. I think it's wonderful that he is so excited about HydroGraph. I am more than grateful for his support, but his position is not the company's position.
Has the company ever coordinated or communicated with him about his social media posts and reports prior to them being posted?
No. I would say there was a period that he was expressing interest in a board seat or a management seat. We had strongly cautioned him that as he was at that point getting a little bit closer to the company, he should not be disclosing anything that we're telling him online. That was very important to us. I, for one, don't believe he's ever said anything that would have been non-public, but no, I think that is always kind of a tricky thing because he really likes to share a lot. And, we have decided that didn't make sense for us. And I think, we have a good relationship. Again, very happy to see his support. And I think it certainly helped us get here.
How do you stack up against, just again, one more time, how do you stack up against sort of competitors? Do you know who your sort of top competitors are? Is there more than enough to go around, or is this a winner take all sort of industry?
No. I think there's more than enough to go around. I would say, it's a hard question because different companies have a different strategy. So we are the only, I'm trying to think about my words now. I'm quite sure this is true. We're really the only synthetic company that's a pure play graphene. Levidian focuses on decarbonization. GMG is producing products, lubricants, greases, batteries. Lighten's producing batteries. Black Swan, they're producing graphene that they sell. Nano Explorer is a little bit more secretive, and I would say they're another graphene production company, but our graphenes are very different. And I would say, kind of at the higher end of the market, we are quite unique in that we are really a pure graphene production company. But that aside, I don't see our competitors as competitors. I'm very close with everyone in the industry. We all obviously talk about a lot that we're going through, and we're strongly supportive of each other. So I think that there's plenty of market for all of us to play in. I think really the competitors are legacy materials, or it's kind of convincing customers why they should take nanomaterials seriously.
All right, milestones. What are 5 key milestones that investors should watch out for over the next 6 months?
Great question. So I think that for one, the large-scale facility announcement is a big one I know people have been waiting for. I would say the EPA is a large announcement people have been waiting for. We would like to disclose our relationship with the military, and that is something that we are waiting on an update for. We would also, kind of tied to that, like to announce more information on this potential for a domestic geek. And I would say lastly, it's contracts. I mean, I think that's the golden ticket, right? Everyone's waiting for contracts. Everyone's waiting for revenue.
Yeah, the R word, revenue. It can be a double-edged sword for sure. One way to wreck a good promote is to start talking about revenue. But anyways, at what revenue level do you think you'd sort of like be break even? Do you have any numbers internally sort of about that? Or is that something that you can't comment on?
Can't comment on now, just regarding disclosure, but we will provide more of an update on that soon.
Well, we've heard from critics. We've read some short reports. In one line, why will HydroGraph prove them wrong?
Well, I think we already have.
Okay. Convince a skeptical institutional, portfolio manager in 15 seconds or less why HydroGraph won't be another hype penny stock story.
Well, man, I think too much to say for 15 seconds, but we have the highest performing material in an industry that is a brand new industry with unlimited market potential at an 80% margin. I mean, this is a slam dunk.
All right. I'm just going to do a couple rapid fire questions that we can use for clips. And then we'll sort of end the interview, but I'll be clipping this part out. These are sort of like yes, no questions. Have insiders sold stock during your recent surge? Yes or no?
No.
Do you have any debt? Yes or no?
No.
COGS per kilogram under $300. True or false?
We already addressed that.
I know this is just I'm going to clip it out. Okay. EPA approval in 2025. Yes or no?
I believe so. Yes.
If the government reopens.
If it reopens, yeah.
Houston will be operational mid 2026. Yes or no?
Latter half of 26.
Is your cost per reactor under 1 million?
Yes.
Does US 15 million of capex generate US 100 million of sales?
Yes.
Do you have an OnlyFans account?
No.
All right, we're all done. Hey, Kjirstin, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. We've finished just a minute under an hour. I promised you about an hour, so we've done very well. I really appreciate you answering all of the questions that you could, and I did, push you on a few that, you were good not to comment on. We don't want to get into any selective disclosure sort of issues. It's been really wonderful to get to know you a little bit better, and I wish you lots of luck with HydroGraph, and I look forward to maybe catching up in the next quarter and seeing how you're doing.
Sounds great. Thanks again.